Yeah, I guess I have to unmute. I haven't had my coffee yet, but I think I'll wait. It looks like people are still shuffling in after a great party last night. You guys all get an award because you were the early birds on time. Last day of the conference. So your reward is a few terrible jokes. Yes. All right. Thanks. You have some enthusiasm. I have to warm up my voice anyway. Why did the vintage PLC apply for a job in archaeology? It felt at home with things that couldn't be patched up. Why did the PLC break up with the HMI? It needed space. Things were getting too controlled. ChatGPT made these for me this morning, so. Why was the SCADA system always picked last in sports? Because it kept showing vulnerability. All right, let's see if there's any other good ones here. Got a few more folks trickling in. Why did the cybersecurity analysts break up with the internet? Too many insecure connections. All right. Does anybody else have any terrible jokes? We can get started, I guess, then. My name is Dan Kennison. I run sales at AirGap. Our booth is in the main room in the back corner, sort of facing the outside where you eat. So encourage everybody to come by, see us, talk to us. We're doing something really clever. I'm going to explain all that today, so you'll learn a lot about how we take a networking approach to cybersecurity in the OT environment and for critical infrastructure. And then this should be a short presentation, so hopefully I'll have some room for questions at the end. And if we can't get to those or I can't answer them because I need somebody more technical, then we can just meet at the booth later. And by the way, if you have questions throughout this, feel free to stop me. So I think the IT, OT, cybersecurity landscape is evolving. You guys are at conferences like this because protecting OT systems has never been more critical. There's the separation or the air gap, as we like to say, between OT networks and IT networks. OT being connected to the rest of the network and to the internet is really no longer there. There's a convergence, and because of that, there's increased attacks. So 75% of organizations reported at least one intrusion in the past 12 months, and nation-state attacks on critical infrastructure are increasing. 32% of those attacks now they impact both IT and OT. So what's getting in is finding its way around and spreading across both sets of networks. And the reported number in your sector has increased 27%. So obviously that's why we're all together here, to find solutions for these problems. There's been a ton of investment, and I'm sure you've all done this, in perimeter security. From the WAN or from the DMZ down, you've got some sort of really nice perimeter firewall probably somewhere in your Purdue model, and between the internet and your systems. There's the challenge is in the LAN, so where the IPs connect, all that layer 2 infrastructure is really not very secure. There isn't a ton of visibility into what's going on, what devices are connected, where that traffic is flowing in that network. We've sort of created that as a trust lake. And what we're finding, what we're hearing about every day is something finds its way in, it gets through this really expensive investment that we've made in perimeter security, and once it gets in, it wreaks havoc in the network. And so that's why companies like ours and several of the other vendors here are really focused now on all the blue stuff down here, trying to help you guys with securing the infrastructure in your environments. Lateral movement is really the crux of Zero Trust. Since we don't have a lot of visibility and control inside of that network, this is where attackers are exploiting unpatched systems, they're doing credential harvesting, and they're abusing protocols that exist that, like SMB, RDP, WMI, et cetera. That makes up like 90% of the attacks. If you look at RDP, SMB, WMI, and a couple others, that's the majority of how malware, ransomware spreads and takes control of networks. They're doing man-in-the-middle attacks, and they're living off the land, as I mentioned. So, WMI, PowerShell, they're using these tools to gain access and take over networks. The challenge with the layer 2 network that we see is to be able to secure that, you have to start touching those devices, which in your environment we know is really painful. And it's painful for these reasons that might not be compatible. Maybe the vendor that you're using says, don't touch that machine. I don't know if it's going to break something. It's painful to deploy all these from a time perspective, rolling folks out to sites, maintaining all these patches and updates. They might have a performance impact on systems. I had a customer tell me that they had a McAfee virus scanner on one of their devices and it was killing their line, just from a performance standpoint. And they actually had to pull it off to get back to capacity. So that was just an interesting example of, these agents require CPU and memory to run, and sometimes that can cause problems. They might interfere with other platforms or other software on the device. And some of these things you just can't put a software agent on. Come on in. You missed all the jokes. Headless devices. It's crazy to imagine that there's like an 8 times the number of devices that you can actually put software on. So Windows, Linux, Mac, Android. There's 8 times of that of IoT and OT devices that you can't touch. They might be headless, and there's no way to get an agent on them at all. And then deploying this at scale is really challenging. Amongst other issues with user acceptance and whether or not they support operating systems. Does this resonate with you guys? You have these challenges? Okay, I see some heads nodding. So I also hear these 3 kind of problem statements from customers. Number 1, they're trying to use remote access. They've got to get vendors or techs, employees into these systems to do updates or to fix things. And that person can't always come into the plant or to the facility. And so they're looking for a secure, cost-effective way to allow folks into these systems in their environment. And they haven't quite found the right solution. They can't see everything that's on the network. I heard a story at Manusec, and the guy said, I found an old Nortel switch in the ceiling, and there was things connected to it. It was attached to the network. So there's always things being plugged in. You want to see what's out there. So visibility is another key problem statement. And then lastly, this is something that we pride ourselves on is enforcement. How do I control inside the LAN when something bad gets into the network? So we took a swing at this at our company, and we said, okay, let's start with user to machine segmentation. Let's give folks a way to access these systems in the most secure way we can and make it super easy for them. So we came up with this concept of a disposable jump box. How many people here use jump boxes or jump hosts or Bastion servers? Any Citrix VDI users here? Okay, few. So think of this as a replacement potentially for Citrix VDI, for jump hosts or Bastion servers, and also VPN technology. So that was the first thing, and I'll talk about that in detail. The second thing is we've got to help you solve visibility. So we built an asset inventory visibility platform that can find all the devices that are in the network, but can also talk to all the other systems out there. There's some really great vendors here that have been doing asset management, asset visibility for a long time, and we integrate with those vendors, and we sort of pull all their information in with ours so you get a single source of truth of what's out there. And then from there, you can start to enforce policy on those devices. What packets can they send and where? And that's part of our micro-segmentation solution. For visibility, I'm going to do a demo today of what we call Threat GPT. For those of you that were here at the very beginning, you saw me using ChatGPT to make jokes. We use ChatGPT integrated into our platform to help you find vulnerabilities, figure out what's on your network in a really easy contextual method. And then one of the most favorite products of ours from our customers and prospects is our ransomware kill switch, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the rest of the presentation. So some of the challenges with these legacy jump hosts and VDI is they're expensive. You're having to deploy a lot of stuff on site inside your protected network. Servers, hypervisors, Windows instances, VMware instances, licensing for all of that. So there's a big lift to do that, both from a time standpoint, your energy plus the cost of all that licensing and equipment. Once it's in your network, it's vulnerable to attack, right? It's persistent. So that was one of the other challenges with having stuff in your network. Obviously, it's complex. You've got to manage this. You've got to update it. So there's one more thing for you to deal with. And we find that you have very unique needs. So you might have a specific application that has to run on a certain version of operating system with the right, version of Flash, or it may be something very unique, and it's not going to run the latest version of whatever. So being able to, have that custom image ready and clean for you is another challenge. So we tried to address all that by pushing all of this into the cloud and taking it outside your environment, taking all the licensing away from a Windows VMware perspective. That's all part of a SaaS service. Making it compliant with tools you might already use. Maybe you already have a ZTNA remote access product that you can run on it. It'll tie into your SSO and MFA. It's all agentless, so you can use SSL and RDP with it, but you're not having to install anything on vendor machines or employee machines. They can use any device to connect into this, unlike traditional VPN technology. And then we give you full segmentation and security. And that ultimately gives you better uptime. So how does this work? Hopefully you guys can see this in the back. This is a high-level architectural diagram. So on the left, does this have a pointer? It does, you probably can't see that. On the left, you have a user, maybe outside your network. This could be a TAC or a vendor partner. They want to access a SCADA system or some sort of private app inside your environment. So the way that it works is this user would authenticate using single sign-on, so you can tie it into your Okta or whatever you use, and use multi-factor authentication through an authenticator app. Once they authenticate, they're going to access the air-gap firewall in the cloud, and from there they're going to be presented with an application library. I'll show you that in a second. that user can then select which application that they want to use. Some of them might be web-only applications because the device or application on the inside, that's how you access it. Others might require that custom image or that custom software that maybe runs on Windows. And in that case, we would, in the cloud, spin up on the fly what we call the disposable jump box. So it's a golden template image of Windows that gets spun up with unique IP, username and credentials for RDP. So now this user can use a native RDP client to connect into that jump box. And then all of this, whether it's Web SSL or the Windows jump box, are able to access those applications inside the network using a secure tunnel. So we don't use a traditional IPsec tunnel, so we're not piercing through the firewall to get in. This is actually a WireGuard, if you're familiar with WireGuard. This is a WireGuard tunnel that has a persistent connection out. I think it's port 1705 or something. It's one port to open outbound on the firewall. So much better from a security standpoint. It has some of the best compression as well. So you get better performance, better security, and there's really nothing to put on site other than this connector. This connector is native to most Linux distributions today. So this could run on a VM, or if you wanted to run it on a physical box, you could. As an admin, when you connect to this and you launch it, it'll give you a 2-line script which you can paste into your Ubuntu image if you want, and it will create that secure connection back. Okay, any questions? Okay. If you do have some and you're shy, you can just talk to me later.
Wait, I do have one.
Yeah.
So does that can replace VPN?
Yeah. Yeah, so your question was, can it replace VPN? Absolutely, yeah.
And how many users would this one application support?
Oh, great question. How many users would this application support? So it depends on the connector and its processing power, but it'll support lots of applications, and you can deploy many connectors. This is just a high-level diagram, but most people will deploy at least 2 connectors for load balancing and redundancy. You can also deploy a connector somewhere specific in your network that maybe can't access other things. By the way, it doesn't really matter if you do that. You can do that. But all of the access control, which device, which IP, which network segment is all controlled via the cloud. So this connector could have access to all the systems, and it would still remain secure.
Oh, one more question.
Yeah.
What is this called? It's not called VPN, IPsec tunnel. What is this connection called?
This is a WireGuard connection.
WireGuard.
Yeah, WireGuard. So the challenge with VPN, since you brought up, does it replace VPN? Most VPN solutions require a client on the user's machine. So there's one challenge. You've got to deploy that out there. And then you have to pierce a hole into and through the firewall into the system. And now this user's sitting somewhere on the network, right? And we see that could potentially set up a larger trust zone. Now you've got somebody that's on your network with, I don't want to say unfeathered access, but maybe more trusted access than a connector that is ratcheted down to that specific user based on their single sign-on credentials. Yes?
Do you need to log in twice, like SSL, once and then RDP second time, to disable access to the
Yeah, good question. So his question was, do you need to log in twice? So the user, when they first log in through their SSL credentials, is going to be presented with this library, their application library, what they can access. But for a disposable jump box, they could log in again, right? So for a web SSL, no, but for a disposable jump box, yes, because we're going to create a unique disposable jump box. So there'll be a Windows instance, and it will have a long username and password, and that's going to get destroyed or disposed of after that session's over, which is the value of this. One of the values of this product is these jump boxes, the IP goes back into AWS's pool, and there's millions of them out there, and then the username and password is killed for that session. So it gets rid of that attack surface. Yes?
Yeah, is there a way on the application dashboard to only display the applications that are applicable to that vendor? Because it sounds like you're using one wire for all vendors. So rather than displaying them all, can you only display the ones that they need?
Yes. Yeah, so your question was, can you, I'm just repeating it for everybody else that may not hear you. Can you just display the applications for that vendor? It's actually all the way down to that specific user. So that user at that vendor might only see one or two of these, whereas another user at that vendor would see different ones, and then a different vendor would see completely different applications.
But they're all sharing the same disposable jump box, right?
They're sharing the same connector potentially, but they might have unique disposable jump boxes. Because one vendor might have a specific application that runs, and so you could load in custom templates or golden images. Yes?
On those images that you spin up, can you pass domain credentials through that? So, because we might have some authentication requirements, you know, for secured HMIs or secure controllers. I'm thinking with like package talk security.
Yeah.
And that, a single sign-up, typically that's done with, you know, on-prem domain controller or role-based, granular role-based access control based upon that specific user.
I think,
You can pass those credentials, the domain credentials through that.
so the domain controller can, and I may have to ask my engineer on this one, but so for the first login to get to the neighborhood, yes, you can use your AD credentials through your identity provider. But for the jump box, I'm not sure. I think the answer is we could do it, but for security, we don't do it because it's unique every time, and then we kill that, and it goes away. So they're already authenticated in, then they get their jump box. But let's take that one back, because that's a good one. I don't know the answer to. Yeah?
So there was, you mentioned you can do session recording, so how would that work? What is it for the staff?
Good. I had forgot to mention that. So he asked about session recording. So when you launch one of these sessions and you're making changes on the network, you can, as an admin, you can choose which users and what types of applications to record. We have heard instances where customers say, I can't record that for some kind of compliance reason, so they just don't record. But most customers want to record it, so they have a log. They can actually go back, and if something were to happen, they can go back and see exactly what was changed. So they get a video file, that they can go back. And so you could say, oh, something happened at 10 o'clock. Well, you go right back to 10 o'clock, or in that area and see what changes got made on what system and by which user.
And then you get stored in the cloud.
It's all stored in our cloud, yeah. Great, okay.
The actual jump box that you generate, where does that exist? Where does the compute that live? Is it on-site or is it on-prem or is it in cloud?
The compute lives in cloud.
And is the environment compliant?
Is it what, compliant?
Compliant, if you're using it to do controls in the system and their site, is it compliant?
I think so, but I'd ask my engineer on that one. This is a relatively new product, so if that requires a certification, then maybe it's not ready yet, but if it may just be compliant, so I don't know the answer. Okay, great. Lots of good questions, thank you. The next thing in the customer problem statement was discovery or visibility. So I'll talk a little bit about that. So you want to know 100% of your infrastructure. Once you drop our solution in, this is a little bit different. We actually have a set of servers that attach to the network. And I'll show you an architecture diagram in a second. But they're going to see every flow, every packet, and they're going to be able to identify what devices are out there in your network. They're going to see every IP. We use a bunch of different methods to identify devices. So one is we talk to vendor partners like Armis and and others to get their databases. We talk to CrowdStrike. We talk to SentinelOne. What we also we'll tie OS to fingerbank to match, and then we look at protocol too. So we're looking at protocols to say, okay, this is this type of device based on its protocol. And from there, we can really map the attack surface. So you'll get a chart. You get a chart like this that shows you every device in the environment and how that device is communicating between other devices. And then we tie into Grafana so you can see it's like having a Wireshark running at all times, essentially. You'll be able to see every packet to every machine. And you can even ask ThreatGPT, how are these which devices are talking to each other? Does this device talk to this device? And on what ports? What protocols does it use? So all of that detail is there for you. Oops, I went the other way, skipped a couple slides. So we've mapped the attack surface. We can see how all the traffic's flowing. We can see all the devices that are out there. We're going to give you a ton of intelligence on those devices. So we'll give you visibility by brand, by what type of device it is, maybe what type of automation it is, what manufacturer it is. Is it Rockwell versus something else? And is it a network element, or is it an asset? So is it a switch or an AP, or is this a Rockwell PLC HMI? So we'll give you tons of visibility and reporting. We'll even categorize them all into nice little groups for you, from automations to monitors, servers, you name it. We break it down for you, tell you how many are out there. And then I'll skip over to the ThreatGPT so you can see that example. So this is, you guys probably can't read this, but this says Dan Kennison here, so this is my little network at home. I recorded this video before I left. So I just went and I asked ThreatGPT, as the sales guy who's not as technical as most of you, I said, okay, well, what can I ask you? Or what can I ask you? Yeah, so that's the question that I popped in there. And then it broke it down for me. And it says, you can ask me questions about network security related to your environment. Some examples include, show me the device in my network, find all the traffic flows in my network. And then I said, well, I know I have a lot of Apple devices. Let me ask it if it can find list all my Apple OSs in the network. And there it goes. It's listing them all out for me. So pretty cool. If you guys are like me, I love ChatGPT. I think I use it every day. So to be able to use that insight for your network is pretty incredible. Yeah?
Is that a private instance of the ThreatGPT?
It's not a private instance, but and I can't explain it well. I've heard it explained a couple times, but the way that we've figured out a way to be able to leverage the tool without actually sending it your real data. So it's not private. It is using the main ChatGPT, but we're not actually sending your raw data into ChatGPT. Okay, so the last piece of our offering is my most favorite. And this is where we really take that trust lake in the environment and microsegment it and provide you a high level of security. So we talked earlier about how there is this big trust lake. There hasn't been a lot of time, money, and energy spent on it. And part of the reason is it's really difficult. You either have to use ACLs or a combination of ACLs and NACs, which is incredibly challenging and difficult, and still don't really get you down to the segmentation level that you'd like. The other solutions require you to install agents, or maybe even a physical box in front of that device, which you could call an overlay. So it's really challenging. And on this zero trust journey, Gartner will say that these projects, they outlast most security leaders. And I don't think any of us have really figured out how to go to complete zero trust. We might never get there, but we're going to try to get you a little bit closer. This is how we do it. And this is where most people have this kind of like weird reaction of like, whoa, that's really clever, or you guys are crazy. The first thing that we do is we become the default gateway for all of your devices. And we do that by becoming first a DHCP relay. So we're going to turn off the SVI interface on your core switch. That's kind of why it's great out there, or wherever all your VLANs roll up to. So we'll just tap into a trunk port. You'll turn off that SVI interface. We become the SVI interface. So it's the same gateway IP address for all your devices. That doesn't change. And by doing that, we sit in the middle of your IPAM server, or we could run DHCP for you. Whether it's static, we have ways to do this with static, or DHCP. Essentially, we re-subnet the device. So the IP doesn't change, the gateway doesn't change, but the subnet changes to a /32 address. And if you're in a /32 network, you're in a network of how many? 1, yeah, good. I needed some prizes. If you're in a network of 1, then your device, your IP-enabled device, is only going to send packets to the gateway. It won't send packets laterally. So we've basically just, without you having to touch a switch, make any configuration changes, other than turn off one interface, we've re-engineered your network almost, I should say overnight, instantaneously. Like this is like a 30-second flip, right, or less. You could, if you do this, you coincide turning ours on and turning off the SVI interface, devices will not know. They will continue to operate. They might lose 2 packets, 3 packets. So we've gone into networks and deployed, and there's 0 downtime. The devices don't know. They got this new subnet mask. They just start sending all their packets to us. So now we're in line. We've re-engineered your network from a layer 2 network to a layer 3 network. And by doing so, we can now give you 100% visibility into how every device is talking to every other device in your network, and then allow you to build policy to enforce better protections and reduce that attack surface. So the first thing that we do with our customers is we let it sit there, learn for a week or 2. They get these beautiful graphs and reports. And then we say, well, the first thing you want to do is, remember what I said earlier, 90% of the attacks are through like the top 4 protocols. It's WMI and SMB and RDP. We'll just turn all that off. So we can block that stuff. And within hours of work, you've reduced the attack surface down to about 10% of what it was before. So that's huge for customers, and that's a very light lift. Then you can start to get more granular, and you can say, okay, I know what this looks like on any given day. This is a good network. I'm not infected. I want this line to talk to each other. I want these devices to talk to each other on these ports and protocols. So you build policy to allow that. And only to block the things that you don't want. Any questions? Oh, lots. Okay, start over here.
Which part is your product?
Oh, our product is this right here, this piece. Those are actually just network edge appliances that we ride on. So like a standard Dell network edge, a VEP 4600, we can run on any x86 platform or in a VM. So about 50/50 our customers use an off-the-shelf x86 platform, or they use a VMware instance. Yes?
What if the asset is already having an IP address? Do you need to move it into a DHCP mode only then keep part of it, or what?
You don't need to move it into DHCP. If it's static, then the device needs to be updated with the /32, which can, we have some scripts that do that. You can use GPO. Sometimes people will just touch the device one time. They'll go out and change the subnet mask manually. But there's a few different ways to do that at scale. if you don't have DHCP. Yeah.
How do you handle necessary broadcast?
Necessary broadcasts? You can allow broadcast traffic. You can also limit broadcast, just like any other traffic. You can control what class of devices that it's allowed to go to. So when you build policy, you can say it's this device to this device, or I could say all Windows devices, or all of my cameras need to talk with this broadcast traffic. So I'm going to allow that to go to all the cameras.
Sure, but my understanding is that it would change on the asset itself, the network.
Correct.
So assuming it is maybe previously in /24, now the device knows it's in /32.
Correct.
So when it now sends a broadcast, it will only send broadcast to itself and no longer to this 24.
I will have to ask my SE on that one. I don't know. I don't think we have that challenge, but let's find out.
Because we have some DCS vendors that is solely for broadcast.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Let's take that back and get you an answer. Okay, good. By the way, we don't just support /32. We also support /30. So there could be instances where you can't run a /32 and you could run a different subnet type like a /30. Still keep a very small segment, but allow certain things to work better. So that could be the answer. We also offer a connector. So on this journey to cloud security, a customer might say, great, I have this, now I have all this microsegmentation and all this security locally. I don't want another box on-prem, so we can use our connector to send straight to your favorite cloud security provider, be it Prisma or Zscaler or Netscope or one of those folks in the cloud. So I talked about the ransomware kill switch earlier. So this is your sort of like DEF CON levels, or if you guys are familiar with like Smokey the Bear, what's the fire risk today? You can, on a normal day, you're operating at green, but if the SOC says, hey, we think there might be a vulnerability, you can then have predefined sets of policies that get more and more restrictive. And I would say the red button is, the alternative to, hey, when the you-know-what hits the fan, run over to the cage and pull the cable out, or turn off the SVI interface. Our network is shut down. The nice thing about this is you can do it instantaneously from anywhere in the world, and you can quickly go back if it's a false alarm or once you have the problem resolved. We also give you ransomware early detection, so we're looking for anomalies using AI and ML in the network because we can see all the packets, and then we can we give you or another network detection response solution or other tools that you have may indicate that, and so you can have that be part of your incident response. And you can automate this stuff as well, too. This is just it in action. So this is, again, on my home network. I recorded a little video for you guys. So I just click yellow. It asks me to confirm. I type the word yellow in, and so on. And that's how you would move up and down. And it's pretty much instantaneous. So once you flip that switch, we'll start blocking those transmissions. It's pretty easy to deploy, as I mentioned before. You drop a couple boxes in, you turn it on, you onboard your VLANs in our UI, which even I was able to do, and then that traffic starts flowing through the platform. I got my 5-minute warning, which is perfect. I think this is a 2-minute video. So I just wanted to close with one of our customer videos. This is Rebecca Warnett from Flextronics. And that'll bring us to the end of the presentation.
I'm Rebecca Ornett. I am the Business Information Security Officer at Flex, and my main job is to really tie our security teams into how our business operates. So all the way down to the manufacturing floors, but then also through to our sales teams and segments. The top 3 things that AirGap does really well, they really make microsegmentation easy. That's number 1. That's really what's there at the heart of it. It's so easy to deploy something that's so synonymously associated with extremely challenging, costly, huge investment, and they're just making the road and the entry point so much easier, and they're really lowering the threshold for that. The second, and this is along the lines of easy, so we said easy to implement, that's the best. Easy to use. We are training our teams so quickly, where comparatively, we would have to hire a whole new workforce to do something like this. So it's really meeting the need there. And then I would say, thirdly, it allows us to govern it globally and make sure that security standards are really being forced along all of the sites, all of the operations where we're using it. And what's really unique is that AirGap as a company doesn't require a big infrastructure overhaul to do it. It doesn't require us to install something on each of these endpoints, which can be really challenging, especially when we talk about the OT and manufacturing environment. So really, we came to AirGap because we had this list of requirements, and they were the only solution provider that met us on every single one. Some of the key improvements we've seen since deploying AirGap in our manufacturing facilities is we've been able to reorient how we address security, all because of AirGap. So my biggest surprise when we were adopting AirGap was really seeing all of the things that our equipment just naturally wanted to communicate with that we didn't want it to. AirGap shows you the network map of every single communication that an endpoint can make within the tool. Then they show you all the things that they're blocking and the things that you actually want it to communicate with. And it takes something that could be a naturally messy image, just the way our devices are designed today, and cleans it up completely. And it's a delightful tool that I love using. I love showing customers. I love showing teams when we're bringing them AirGap within Flex because it's so clear why we do microsegmentation. I would absolutely recommend AirGap to anyone who's struggling with getting control over their OT environment on the manufacturing floor. Manufacturing equipment is difficult, and you can't install anything on it, not really, not reliably. And this allows the equipment vendors kind of the freedom and the safety. But then in your manufacturing environment, it allows you the security and the control that you need over each individual endpoint.
Any final questions from anybody? Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time this morning.